Most people think losing a business happens slowly. Bad decisions, bad markets, bad luck. They're wrong. Sometimes, it happens because the person sitting beside your hospital bed is already planning what they'll do after everyone believes you're finished. My name is Richard Lawson. I'm 69 years old, and for 38 years, I owned Lawson Industrial Systems, a manufacturing company outside Columbus, Ohio. We built custom steel components for factories across the Midwest. Nothing glamorous, just honest work that paid honest people. When I started the company in 1986, I had one welding machine, a rented warehouse, and exactly $4,700 left after buying my first pickup truck. By the time I turned 68, we employed nearly 200 people. Most of them I'd known for decades. Some had watched my daughter grow up. My wife Helen used to joke that the company was our third child. She wasn't wrong. We built it together. She handled payroll. I handled production. Every major decision was made across our kitchen table after dinner. Helen passed away 4 years ago after a long battle with ovarian cancer. 43 years of marriage, gone in less than 12 months. After she died, work became the only place that still felt familiar. The machines sounded the same. The employees still called me boss. Life kept moving. At least, that's what I believed. My daughter, Olivia, had been working at the company for almost 6 years. Smart, confident, MBA from Ohio State. I was proud of her. Everyone expected she'd eventually become CEO, including me. Last February, I started having severe chest pain during a supplier meeting. At first, I ignored it. By evening, I couldn't. 2 days later, surgeons informed me I needed emergency triple bypass surgery. Recovery would take at least 8 weeks. Before going into the operating room, I called Olivia into my hospital room. I need you to keep things running. She smiled and squeezed my hand. I've got it, Dad. I won't let you down. Those were the last words she spoke before they wheeled me into surgery. For nearly 7 weeks, I stayed away from the office. The doctors were strict. No stress, no work, no visitors unless necessary. Olivia called every evening. Everything's fine. Orders are strong. Everyone says hello. I never had a reason to doubt her. Then, one Tuesday morning, she arrived carrying a leather folder. Dad, just a few corporate documents. I looked at the stack. So many. She laughed. You know how banks are? Since you're recovering, they need updated authorization signatures. It sounded reasonable. I'd signed paperwork like that dozens of times over the years. I signed every page she pointed to. She thanked me, kissed my forehead, and left. I never read a single document. 3 weeks later, my cardiologist finally cleared me to return to the office for half days. I couldn't wait. I even wore the same navy suit Helen had bought me on our 40th anniversary. As my driver turned into the company entrance, something felt wrong. The blue Lawson Industrial Systems sign I'd seen every morning for almost 4 decades was gone. In its place stood a brand new silver sign, Ridgeway Manufacturing Group. I frowned. Did we take the wrong exit? The driver shook his head. No, sir. This is your company. I stared through the windshield. Employees I had worked beside for 30 years walked past the gate. None of them looked happy. None of them looked surprised to see the new sign. Then security stepped in front of my car. One guard leaned toward the window. I'm sorry, sir. You can't enter this property. I smiled politely. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My name is Richard Lawson. I own this company. The guard looked at me, then at a tablet in his hand. His face changed completely. He swallowed once before quietly saying, Mr. Lawson, according to our records, you sold it 6 weeks ago. For a few seconds, I honestly thought the guard had confused me with someone else. I rolled down the window completely. My name is Richard Lawson. I founded this company. I've owned it since 1986. The guard looked uncomfortable. I know who you are, sir. But my instructions are very clear. He turned the tablet toward me. Across the screen was my employee profile. Instead of owner and CEO, it read, former executive consultant. Below that, one sentence nearly stopped my heart. Ownership officially transferred on March 18th. March 18th, I closed my eyes. That was the same week Olivia brought those documents to my hospital room. The bank paperwork, a cold feeling settled in my stomach. What exactly did I sign? Before the guard could answer, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The driver's door opened. Olivia stepped out. Perfect business suit, leather briefcase, confident smile. She walked toward me like this was just another Tuesday morning. Dad, I was hoping we'd talk before you came here. I got out of the car slowly. What happened to my company? She sighed. Not out here. Inside. The security guard looked at her. She simply shook her head. He doesn't have authorization anymore. Those words hit harder than my surgery ever had. I stared at my own daughter. You told them not to let me in. It's only temporary. Temporary? She lowered her voice. Dad, Ridgway owns the company now. The board approved the acquisition. What board? I own the majority shares. She looked away. Not anymore. For the first time in my life, I saw something in Olivia's face I'd never seen before. It wasn't guilt. It was calculation. Like she'd practiced this conversation 100 times. You signed the shareholder restructuring agreement. No. I signed bank papers. You signed every page. My chest tightened. I trusted you. I know. She didn't even deny it. I did what was best for the company. I laughed once, a short, hollow laugh. You sold 40 years of my life while I was lying in a hospital bed. The company needed younger leadership. The investors agreed. What investors? Before she could answer, the front doors opened. A tall man in an expensive gray suit walked outside. Mid-50s, perfect haircut, perfect smile, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. He extended his hand. Richard Lawson. I'm Daniel Mercer, CEO of Ridgway Manufacturing, CEO of my company. He spoke as though we'd never met. I've heard wonderful things about you. I ignored his hand. Who are you? A businessman who purchased a struggling company. I felt my jaw tighten. Struggling? We had record profits last year. Daniel smiled politely. According to the financial reports we reviewed. That wasn't entirely accurate. I turned toward Olivia. What financial reports? She didn't answer. Daniel did. The reports your own daughter provided during negotiations. Something didn't make sense. I knew every balance sheet, every contract, every major customer. The company wasn't struggling, not even close. Either Daniel Mercer was lying, or someone had changed the numbers before the sale. Then Daniel reached into his briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and handed it to me. Perhaps you'd like to read the documents you signed. I looked at the first page. My signature was there. Real, undeniably mine. But the title above it made my blood run cold. Stock purchase agreement. I never remembered seeing those words. Not once. I slowly looked back at Olivia. She couldn't meet my eyes anymore. And that's when I realized the biggest lie wasn't that I'd sold my company. The biggest lie was that my daughter hadn't acted alone. I didn't open the rest of the folder. Not there. Not standing in front of the building I'd spent nearly 4 decades building with my own hands. Instead, I tucked it under my arm and looked at Daniel Mercer. How much did you pay? He answered without hesitation. $32 million. The number meant nothing to me. Not because it was small, because I never wanted to sell. You can't put a price on 40 years of your life. Olivia finally spoke. Dad, this wasn't personal. I looked at her. You forged my future and you're telling me it wasn't personal. I didn't forge anything. You signed every document. I trusted my daughter. Daniel cleared his throat. Mr. Lawson, I think everyone is emotional today. If you'd like, Ridgway would be happy to retain you as a consultant. I almost smiled. A consultant? At the company I built? He nodded calmly. Your experience still has value. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. He didn't want me around because he respected me. He wanted me around because the employees still trusted me. A familiar face makes hostile takeovers look friendlier. I turned around and walked back toward my car. Neither of them tried to stop me. During the drive home, I finally opened the folder. Every page carried my signature. Every page, share transfers, board resolutions, corporate restructuring, power of attorney, sale authorization. Everything was legally signed. Except, something bothered me. The pages looked too clean, too perfectly organized. When Helen and I signed documents together over the years, there were always coffee stains, sticky notes, handwritten corrections, initials in the margins. These papers looked like they had been assembled after I'd signed them, almost as if my signature had simply been placed wherever someone needed it. By the time I reached home, I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious, and curiosity has saved me more times in business than emotion ever has. The first person I called wasn't Olivia. It wasn't Daniel Mercer. It was my attorney, Margaret Ellis. She'd represented Lawson Industrial Systems for nearly 25 years. She answered on the second ring. Richard, I heard you were coming back this week. I was. I need to see you. Today. She must have heard something in my voice. I'll cancel my afternoon. 1 hour later, I was sitting across from her conference table while she slowly flipped through every page I'd brought. She stopped halfway through, adjusted her glasses, then looked directly at me. Richard, did you read these before signing? No. They were brought to my hospital room. Olivia said they were banking documents. Margaret closed the folder. I was never informed about this sale. That got my attention. What? Transactions this size require outside corporate counsel. I've handled every acquisition this company's ever made. I wasn't contacted. I frowned. So who handled it? She pointed to the last page. A law firm from Chicago, one I'd never heard of. They completely bypassed me. Silence filled the room. Then Margaret asked the question I hadn't wanted to hear. Richard, do you remember signing every page? I thought back to that hospital room. Pain medication. Machines beeping. Doctors coming and going. Olivia turning pages quickly. Sign here, Dad. And here. One more. Last one. No, I didn't remember the documents, only trusting the person handing them to me. Margaret leaned back. I can't promise fraud, but I can promise this. If someone intentionally misrepresented legal documents to obtain your signature, the sale may not be as final as they believe. For the first time that day, I felt something I hadn't felt since seeing the new company sign. Hope. Then Margaret reached for her phone. I'm calling a forensic document examiner. And after that, she looked straight at me. I want every medical record from the week you signed these papers. I frowned. My medical records. She nodded slowly. If you were heavily medicated. This case just became a lot more interesting. The next morning, I drove back to St. Mary's Medical Center. Not as a patient, as a man looking for answers. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Mr. Lawson, it's good to see you walking again. I forced a smile. I need copies of my medical records from March. She directed me to the records department. 20 minutes later, I walked out carrying a thick envelope. I didn't open it in the parking lot. Instead, I drove straight to Margaret's office. She already had someone waiting, a quiet man in his early 60s named David Monroe. For 30 years, he'd examined disputed signatures and legal documents for courts across Ohio. He didn't start by looking at my signature. He started by looking at the paper. The paper tells the story before the ink does, he said. For nearly an hour, he studied every page through a magnifier. He measured margins, compared printer marks, checked staple holes. Finally, he looked up. Interesting. Margaret leaned forward. What? David pointed to 3 different documents. These pages weren't printed together. What do you mean? The signatures are genuine. I believe Mr. Lawson signed these. But he slid 3 pages beside each other. The toner, paper grain, and printer alignment don't match. Margaret frowned. So someone assembled this packet from multiple print jobs. I stared at him. Is that unusual? For ordinary paperwork? No. For a $32 million acquisition. Very. He tapped one page. This page was printed weeks after another page carrying the same signature. The room went silent. I felt my heartbeat speeding up. So, my signature may have been placed into a completely different packet. David nodded carefully. I'm saying, I'd like access to the original documents, not copies. If the originals show what I think they'll show. Someone rearranged this agreement after it was signed. Margaret immediately picked up her phone. I'm filing an emergency preservation request. No originals get destroyed. No digital files disappear. No shredding. For the first time, I saw genuine concern in her face. Then my own phone buzzed. Olivia. I let it ring. It stopped. 1 minute later, another call. This time, Daniel Mercer. I answered. Richard. His voice sounded friendly. Too friendly. I heard you've hired an attorney. I already had one. A short laugh. I'd advise against making this adversarial. Would you? These things get expensive. I'm aware. We'd be willing to increase your consulting package. There isn't enough money in Ohio. Silence. Then his voice changed. Harder. You signed the documents. We both know that. I signed something. I haven't decided what. Another pause. Finally, he said, you should think very carefully before accusing people of crimes. I smiled. I'm not accusing anyone. Yet. Then I hung up. Margaret looked at me. He sounds nervous. He should be. Just then, David closed the medical file I'd brought from the hospital. He had been reading while we spoke. His eyebrows slowly came together. Richard, you said your daughter brought the paperwork on March 18th. Yes. He turned the file toward us. According to the medication chart, at the exact time, I supposedly reviewed and signed more than 60 pages of legal documents. I had received 2 powerful pain medications through my IV. Drugs known to cause confusion, memory problems, and impaired judgment. David looked directly at Margaret. I've testified in cases involving far less. Margaret slowly smiled for the first time that day. Then she spoke 7 words that changed everything. "We're not defending this case anymore." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She closed the folder. "Richard, we're going on the offensive." Margaret didn't waste a single minute. By noon, she'd filed motions preventing Ridgway Manufacturing from destroying, altering, or transferring any documents related to the acquisition. Every email, every contract, every digital record, everything was now legally frozen. "If they're hiding something," she said, "they're officially out of time." For the first time since leaving the hospital, I felt like I wasn't chasing the truth anymore. The truth was starting to chase them. That afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Lawson?" The voice was hesitant. "My name is Emily Carter. I work in accounting at Lawson. I mean Ridgway now." I recognized her immediately. Emily had joined our company straight out of college, nearly 9 years earlier. She'd always been quiet, reliable, the kind of employee who never sought attention. "Is everything all right, Emily?" "No." She lowered her voice. "I shouldn't even be calling." "Then why are you?" "Because something happened after you left." I didn't interrupt. 3 days after the ownership transfer, Mr. Mercer ordered us to erase several financial folders from the accounting server. My grip tightened around the phone. "Erase?" He said they were duplicate files. Were they? No. They contained last year's financial statements. The very records Mercer claimed showed my company was struggling. "What happened to them?" "I made copies." Silence. What?" I couldn't explain it, Mr. Lawson. It just felt wrong. So before deleting anything, I saved everything onto an external drive. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly added, "I think they're going to blame everything on you." An hour later, Emily walked into Margaret's office carrying a plain gray backpack. She looked terrified. "I've never done anything like this." Margaret smiled reassuringly. "You did the right thing." Emily handed over a small flash drive. "Everything I could save is on there. Emails, financial reports, internal memos." I copied them before anyone noticed. Margaret immediately handed the drive to her forensic IT specialist. Within minutes, the files appeared on a large monitor. Thousands of documents, years of accounting records, emails between executives, board meeting minutes. Then, one email caught everyone's attention. It had been sent from Daniel Mercer to Olivia 6 weeks before my surgery. The subject line read, "Transition Strategy." Margaret opened it. The first paragraph was ordinary business language. The second wasn't. "Once your father is medically unavailable, execution becomes significantly easier." Nobody in the room spoke. The next sentence was even worse. "Ensure all signature packets are prepared before hospital admission." I felt every muscle in my body go completely still. That email wasn't discussing a business opportunity. It was discussing my surgery, like it was part of the business plan. Emily covered her mouth. "I've never seen that one before." Neither had I. Margaret looked at me. "Richard, I think this stopped being a contract dispute." She clicked another email. This one came from Olivia. "Dad never reads paperwork if he trusts the person handing it to him." There was no misunderstanding anymore. No gray area. No innocent explanation. Only planning. Weeks, maybe months, of planning. I sat there staring at my daughter's words until they blurred together. Margaret quietly closed the laptop. "They didn't take advantage of your recovery. They planned for it." And at that exact moment, her assistant rushed into the conference room. "Margaret, you're going to want to see this." She turned the television on. Local business news filled the screen. A smiling Daniel Mercer stood behind a podium. Beside him was Olivia. The reporter smiled into the camera. "Today, Ridgway Manufacturing officially announced its new president, Olivia Lawson." I had watched Olivia accept awards before. Employee of the Year, Young Business Leader, Local Chamber of Commerce recognition. Every single time, I had been standing in the audience applauding. Now, I watched her smiling beside the man who had taken my company. The reporter asked, "Ms. Lawson, what made you decide this acquisition was the right move?" Olivia didn't hesitate. "Our company had reached a point where it needed modern leadership. Ridgway brings resources, technology, and vision that simply weren't possible under the previous structure." Previous structure. That was how she described 40 years of my life. Not my father's company, not our family's legacy. A structure. Daniel Mercer stepped to the microphone. "Richard Lawson built an excellent business. We're simply taking it into the future." I turned the television off. The room became completely silent. Margaret looked at me carefully. "You okay?" I answered honestly. "No, But I'm thinking clearly. That was more dangerous. The next morning, our forensic IT specialist, Kevin Brooks, arrived carrying a printed report nearly 3 inches thick. I found something. He laid several emails across the conference table. They didn't just discuss the takeover. They rehearsed it. One email from Daniel to Olivia read, "The hospital window gives us approximately 6 weeks before Richard returns. Everything must be completed before then." Another, "Do not discuss numbers over company email after March 1st. Use private accounts only." Another, "Board members who resist will be replaced immediately after closing." Margaret slowly shook her head. This wasn't opportunistic. It was organized. Kevin nodded. "And there's more." He opened another folder. "The board meeting approving the sale. Never actually happened." I frowned. "What?" "The official minutes say it took place on March 21st. According to security badge records, 5 directors weren't even in the building." Emily looked shocked. "They were out of state." Kevin clicked another document. One director was on vacation in Florida. Another was attending a manufacturing conference in Detroit. And one had already resigned 2 weeks earlier. I stared at him. "So who voted?" Kevin looked up. "That's exactly the problem. The signatures appear, but the people weren't there." Margaret immediately started making calls. Within 2 hours, 3 former board members had agreed to meet us. The first was Harold Benson, 74 years old, retired banker. He had served on my board for almost 15 years. The moment he walked into Margaret's office, he looked confused. "Richard, I heard you sold." "I didn't." His expression changed instantly. "What do you mean?" I slid the board minutes across the table. "Apparently you voted in favor." Harold adjusted his glasses. "I most certainly did not. On March 21st, I was fishing in Minnesota with my grandson." He reached into his wallet, pulled out his phone, opened photographs, date stamps, location records, everything. He wasn't anywhere near Ohio. Margaret quietly asked, "Did anyone ask you to sign anything beforehand?" Harold thought for a moment. "Olivia emailed me a routine governance packet. I signed one attendance acknowledgement electronically." Kevin immediately leaned forward. "Do you still have that email?" "I never delete emails." By evening, Kevin had compared Harold's electronic signature with the signature appearing on the official approval documents. They weren't identical. Close, but not identical. Tiny differences, the spacing, the pressure points, the digital timestamp. Kevin looked directly at Margaret. Someone copied his electronic signature and pasted it onto another document. Margaret slowly closed the laptop. "That makes 2 potential frauds. My client's signature, and now a board member's." Before anyone could speak, my phone vibrated. A text message from Olivia. Just 6 words, "Please stop before people get hurt." I read it twice, then a third time. Margaret looked at me. "What is it?" I handed her the phone. She read the message, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't look confident. She looked worried, because innocent people don't send messages like that. Olivia's message stayed on my screen for a long time. "Please stop before people get hurt." Not, "Dad, let's talk." Not, "You've misunderstood everything." Just a warning. I looked at Margaret. "What do you think she means?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked me a question. "Has Olivia ever threatened anyone before?" "Never." "Then this isn't a threat. It's fear." I frowned. "Fear of what?" Margaret slid the phone back toward me. "She isn't saying she'll hurt someone. She's telling you someone else might." The following morning, Kevin arrived earlier than usual. His expression told me something had happened before he even spoke. "I was followed last night." The room fell silent. "What?" He nodded. "Black SUV. No license plate on the front. It stayed behind me for nearly 20 miles. Then disappeared." Margaret's face hardened. "Did you report it?" "I did, but I can't prove anything." Emily looked nervous. "I think someone knows I copied those files." Nobody laughed. Nobody said she was overreacting, because everyone in that room was thinking the same thing. Someone inside Ridgeway had realized information was leaking. Around noon, Margaret's assistant walked in carrying another envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, no signature. It read, "Take the retirement package. Drop the investigation. Enjoy the years you have left." Nothing else. No demand. No explanation. Just those 3 sentences. Margaret immediately handed it to a private investigator she'd worked with before, a former FBI agent named Jack Donnelly. Jack read the note once, then smiled. "This isn't from a professional." "What makes you say that?" "If professionals want you quiet, they don't send letters. They create accidents." The room became very quiet. That afternoon, Jack started digging into Daniel Mercer. Not the company, the man. Within hours, he found something interesting. Daniel Mercer wasn't the original founder of Ridgway Manufacturing. He'd become CEO only 3 years earlier after leading a private investment group that quietly acquired the business. Since then, 3 other family-owned manufacturing companies had been purchased. Each acquisition looked perfectly legal. Each former owner had disappeared from public business afterward. And in every case, the owner had suffered some kind of personal crisis shortly before selling. One had gone through chemotherapy. Another had lost his wife unexpectedly. The third had suffered a serious stroke. Jack looked up from the report. I don't believe in coincidences. Neither did I. Late that evening, I was sitting alone on my back porch when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice. Low, calm. You need to stop. Who is this? Doesn't matter. You've already lost the company. Don't lose anything else. The line went dead. I immediately called the number back. Disconnected. Jack traced it within the hour. Disposable prepaid phone. Purchased with cash. Used once, then destroyed. Professional enough to disappear, but not professional enough to stop talking. Jack leaned back in his chair. They're nervous. I asked why. He smiled. Because guilty people always make one mistake. They can't resist trying to control the story. The next morning, Emily burst into Margaret's office without knocking. She looked pale. I just got fired. What? They said my position was being eliminated. But only mine. Kevin looked at her. Did they ask for your company laptop? Immediately. And my office keys. Jack nodded slowly. They're cleaning house. Emily reached into her purse. There was one more thing. She placed a folded document on the table. I found it inside the copier yesterday. Nobody knew what it was, until Margaret unfolded it. Across the top, in bold letters, were 5 words that made every person in the room stop breathing. Confidential severance payment agreement. Below it, a single name, Olivia Lawson, and beside that name, a payment amount, $8,500,000. She wasn't just made president. She'd been promised millions for helping make the deal happen. $8.5 million. I read the number again. Then a third time. It still didn't make sense. Olivia had spent 6 years working beside me. She already had an executive salary, a company car, performance bonuses. She was going to inherit the business one day anyway. Why would she risk everything? For money she never needed. Margaret was thinking the same thing. This isn't just greed. She tapped the agreement. People don't gamble their family, reputation and freedom for something they already expect to receive. Jack nodded. Someone convinced her she wasn't going to inherit. That thought stayed with me, because I'd never once told Olivia she wasn't. Jack spent the next 48 hours digging into the agreement. The document itself had never been executed. No signatures, just a draft. But drafts tell stories. The payment wasn't described as a bonus. It was listed as a transition success fee. Kevin frowned. I've never seen language like that. Jack had. It's common in hostile acquisitions, when an insider helps buyers take control. Emily looked horrified. So, they paid her to help steal the company. Jack answered quietly. That's exactly what it looks like. That afternoon, Margaret received another surprise. One of Ridgway's outside accountants requested a confidential meeting. His name was Michael Torres. He arrived wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. The first thing he asked was, has anyone followed me? Jack looked outside before answering. Not that we've seen. Michael sat down slowly. I've worked in corporate accounting for 23 years. I've never done this before. Margaret folded her hands. Then why now? He reached into his briefcase and placed a thick envelope on the table. Because Mr. Mercer crossed a line. Inside were internal accounting schedules, purchase valuations, cash flow projections. One spreadsheet immediately caught Kevin's attention. He enlarged it on the monitor. Across the top was written, Lawson Industrial Systems, internal valuation, estimated company value, $118.4 million. The room went silent. Daniel Mercer hadn't paid $32 million because that was the company's value. He'd paid $32 million because that was all he needed to gain control. Michael spoke softly. Internally, Ridgway expected to recover the purchase price within 3 years. I looked at him, so he knew exactly what my company was worth. Michael nodded. He knew. He also knew you'd never voluntarily sell. Margaret leaned forward. Tell me something. Who first contacted Ridgway? Michael hesitated. I wasn't involved in negotiations. But I did overhear one meeting. Mr. Mercer said something I'll never forget. What? Michael took a deep breath. He said, "The daughter opened the door. We just walked through it." Nobody spoke, not even Jack, because one sentence had confirmed everything. Olivia hadn't been manipulated at the last moment. She'd made first contact. As Michael prepared to leave, he stopped at the doorway. "There is one more thing." We all looked up. The acquisition wasn't Ridgway's only objective. Margaret frowned. "What do you mean?" Michael swallowed. "There was something under your factory." I stared at him. "Under my factory?" He nodded. "The board kept discussing a survey. A geological survey. I never understood why." Kevin immediately opened another folder. After several minutes of searching, he found it. A confidential engineering report, prepared 6 months before my surgery. The report concluded that the land beneath Lawson Industrial Systems contained one of the largest undeveloped deposits of rare earth minerals, identified in central Ohio. Estimated value, hundreds of millions of dollars. I slowly leaned back in my chair. They hadn't bought my company. They'd bought the land beneath it. And suddenly, $32 million didn't look generous anymore. It looked like the bargain of the century. I spent almost 40 years believing I knew exactly what I owned. A manufacturing company, 2 production buildings, a warehouse, parking lots, and 26 acres of industrial land. Apparently, I'd been wrong. The land itself was worth more than everything built on top of it. Kevin enlarged the geological report on the conference room screen. The survey had been commissioned by a private exploration company almost a year earlier. Buried beneath my property, along with 2 neighboring industrial parcels, was a substantial deposit of rare earth minerals used in electric vehicles, military electronics, and advanced manufacturing. Jack let out a low whistle. "Now this makes sense." Margaret nodded. "They never wanted the business. They wanted what was underneath it." I looked at the report, estimated underground value, over $480 million. For the first time since this nightmare began, I understood why everything had happened so quickly. My surgery, the paperwork, the rushed sale. None of it had been random. It had been a race to gain control before anyone else discovered what was under the land. As Kevin searched through the files Michael had provided, within minutes, he found another email. This one was from Daniel Mercer to Ridgway's investment partners. The subject line read, "Project Iron Ground." The message was short. "Once ownership transfers, immediately begin rezoning applications. Mineral rights remain confidential until acquisition closes." Jack leaned back in his chair. There it is. They were protecting the secret. Emily looked confused. Why not just buy the mineral rights? I answered before anyone else could. Because they didn't belong to Ridgway. They belonged to Lawson Industrial Systems. And Lawson Industrial Systems belonged to me. Margaret immediately picked up the phone. She contacted a mining rights attorney she'd worked with years earlier. After reviewing the report, his answer surprised everyone. If the acquisition is overturned, the mineral rights automatically return to Richard. Daniel Mercer wasn't fighting over a manufacturing business anymore. He was fighting over nearly $500 million hidden beneath it. Late that afternoon, Jack's phone rang, one of his former FBI contacts. He listened quietly for almost 2 minutes, then hung up. "What happened?" Jack looked directly at me. "Daniel Mercer isn't just being investigated by us." "What do you mean?" "The Securities and Exchange Commission opened a preliminary inquiry into Ridgway last month." "For what?" "Insider trading, accounting irregularities, and suspicious acquisitions." Margaret smiled for the first time all day. "So we're not the only people asking questions." Jack nodded. "No, and once federal investigators learn about this acquisition, they'll ask a lot more." That evening, I finally did something I'd been avoiding. I called Olivia. She answered on the 3rd ring. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she said quietly, "Dad, I told you to stop. I ignored the warning. I know about the minerals." Silence, long silence. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded completely different. "You weren't supposed to find that. So it's true." Another pause. Then, "I'm sorry." It was the first apology she'd offered since this began. But it wasn't enough. "Why, Olivia? I was already giving you everything. You were going to inherit all of it." Her breathing became uneven. "You don't understand? Then help me." She whispered 5 words that changed everything. "Daniel owns more than the company." I frowned. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said something even stranger. "Don't trust anyone on your old executive team." Before I could ask another question, the line went dead. I called back immediately. Her phone was already switched off. I stared at the screen. Margaret looked at me. What did she say? I repeated every word. Jack slowly stood up. If Daniel Mercer has people inside your former management team, this conspiracy just got a whole lot bigger. And at that exact moment, Kevin looked up from his laptop. His face had gone completely pale. I just found the first one. Kevin turned his laptop toward us. On the screen was a spreadsheet listing executive bonus payments from the last 4 years. At first, nothing looked unusual. Then he highlighted one name, Thomas Granger, my chief financial officer, the man who had worked beside me for 18 years, the man I'd trusted with every major financial decision. Jack frowned. What about him? Kevin clicked another file. These bonus payments didn't come from Lawson Industrial Systems. They came from a consulting company. Margaret leaned closer. What consulting company? Kevin enlarged the payment details. The sender was Iron Ridge Consulting, LLC. Jack immediately searched Ohio corporate records. 30 seconds later, he found it. Iron Ridge Consulting wasn't a consulting company. It was owned by a holding corporation controlled by Daniel Mercer. I slowly sat back. Thomas hadn't simply missed what was happening. He'd been getting paid by the buyer while still working for me. For 4 years. Margaret wasted no time. Within 24 hours, she filed a civil fraud lawsuit. She also requested an emergency court injunction, freezing the acquisition until the evidence could be reviewed. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Daniel Mercer arrived with 6 attorneys. I walked in with Margaret, Jack, Kevin, Emily, Michael Torres, and 3 former board members willing to testify. The judge listened for nearly 6 hours. Emails, medical records, accounting files, board signatures, expert testimony, one piece after another. Then Margaret presented the email. Once your father is medically unavailable, execution becomes significantly easier. The courtroom became completely silent. Daniel's attorneys tried to object. The judge overruled them. Then came the forensic document report. Then the medication records. Then Harold Benson testified he had never attended the board meeting. Finally, Michael Torres admitted under oath that Ridgeway executives knew the company was worth more than 3 times the purchase price. Daniel Mercer never looked at me. Not once. 3 weeks later, the judge issued his decision. The acquisition was declared void. Every transfer signed during my hospitalization was canceled. Ownership of Lawson Industrial Systems immediately returned to me. The court also referred the case to federal prosecutors for possible criminal charges involving fraud, conspiracy, and corporate document manipulation. Within 2 months, the SEC expanded its investigation. The FBI executed search warrants at Ridgeway headquarters. Thomas Granger resigned before he could be terminated. Daniel Mercer stepped down as CEO. 6 months later, he was indicted.
Olivia didn't escape responsibility. She accepted a plea agreement after agreeing to cooperate with investigators. She admitted she had contacted Ridgeway first. She admitted she believed the company would eventually fail under my leadership. Daniel convinced her she would become president immediately instead of waiting years to inherit. The $8.5 million payment was never made. It had only been promised. She traded her father for money she never received. Almost a year after the trial, Olivia came to my house, not as an executive, not as my successor, just as my daughter. She looked older. Life had a way of doing that. She stood on my porch holding a small box. Inside were the keys to the office Helen and I had shared for decades. I found these while cleaning my apartment. She couldn't look me in the eyes. "I'm sorry." The words were real this time. Not because she'd been caught, because she finally understood what she destroyed. I accepted the keys. Nothing more. Forgiveness takes longer than an apology. Today, Lawson Industrial Systems is still operating. Not because I refuse to let go, but because I refuse to let deception become the final chapter of my family's story. I've hired a new leadership team. Employee ownership now holds a significant percentage of the company. No single person, not even family, will ever have enough unchecked authority to repeat what happened. Helen used to tell me, trust people with your heart, but verify everything with paperwork. I laughed every time she said it. I don't laugh anymore, because sometimes the most dangerous stranger in your life is the one you've trusted your entire life.